Okay, good afternoon. How you all doing? How's lunch? Good lunch? Nothing better than being, after a really heavy, big, gorgeous lunch, coming into a darkened room on a sunny day, and then being told you've got to pay attention for 45 minutes. I'm lucky, I can stand up, right? So being elevated helps. If I start to nod off, then I'm really going wrong. Okay, so this talk is a little bit out of my comfort zone. It's a little bit further than I usually speak. I'm very comfortable speaking about Java and technology and things, and I have a confession to make. I think this is my first ever Agile conference that's had the badge. Yeah. So you are not my crowd usually. But that doesn't mean you'd have to dislike me. You can get to know me. I will be fine. Okay, so who am I? Who's seen me speak before? Anyone ever seen me speak before? You have? Oh, excellent. And you came back. No, you have to. You work here. Okay. Okay, so those who unfortunately have had the experience of seeing me before, I apologize for that. For those that haven't, I'm going to completely reinvent myself again, so we can get to know each other completely. Okay, so I'm a philosopher first and foremost. I think most people probably are. And what we do is spend our entire time trying to make sense of this strange world and this strange activity that we're involved in called software development. Who does software in the room? Because I realize on Agile conference, we get software people, and then we get people who don't do software, and we get people who never want to even touch the stuff. So go for the first category first. Anyone done software recently, as in written code of any form? Excellent. Okay, second category. Those that don't touch software, but know people who do. And third category, those that never want to touch software in the past. Wonderful. Okay, just for you, this talk is, no. Okay, so my shtick at the moment, my thing in the industry, I suppose, is trying to look at what I think are sort of the gross injustices of software, primarily. I think we do an awful lot of work and a lot of effort gets expended on trying to hurt people. Trying to, not consciously, I'm not saying we're evil, but I am saying that we do a great job of spreading doctrine and dogma that just seems to end up hurting individuals. And my thing is that I spend most of my time with people trying to do this crazy activity of software delivery. Does anyone know why software is absolutely crazy? Utterly nuts. But no one should embark on it, ever. Do you know what the main characteristic of it is? It's not frozen. Oh, boy, is it not frozen. Worse than that, though. Yeah, it's certainly not frozen. What else is wrong with it? Intangible, absolutely. Talking about dinner parties never gets the result you want, unless the dinner party is with people who also do it. Yeah, absolutely. All of those above. The other thing about software is that it's research and development, which means we're engaged in probably one of the most significant intellectually challenging pursuits of this century. And we try and treat it like putting together buildings and doing other things that we can tangibly hit. We do some insane work trying to turn what we do into something that other people relate to. And I think we should, at least if you take one thing away from this talk, maybe an admittance that what we do, if you are in software, what you do, no one else is ever going to get. They're just going to get in their car and the darn thing works or not. Okay? Or they're going to get in a plane and the plane flies. That's probably not the right joke at the moment, but plane flies or not. You know, what we do has tangible outcomes, but the way we approach it does not. What does have a tangible outcome, though, is when we cost money. Okay. Anyone that's run a company, and I've run a couple now, and never tried to budget anything, knows that everything we do costs money even if we can't hit it or see it. Because you sitting on that seat is something that I definitely want to understand why you're there and why all this is going to cost money, which is where the idea of estimating comes in. Although if you take I guess one of the things I've put to you already is that we're involved in research and development. Have you ever tried to go to a researcher and said, when are you going to be done? When are you going to be finished? They don't usually know. In fact, they usually look at you like you're incredibly naive. You're asking me when we'll find a cure for cancer. Well, it's not going to be next Wednesday. However, if we keep at it, maybe sometime in the future. Software, unfortunately, has some of the same qualities as research and development activities, which is why I'm very excited about how the industry is moving towards the idea of not explicitly estimating the way that we have in the past. However, my mission is to try to address some of what I call the inhumanity of software development, the activities we perform, we could dance, the activities we perform to try to make things easier for ourselves that conversely seem to end up making our lives hell. One of those things is pair programming. Who does pair programming in the room? There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to go out and take you outside or anything. No. Pair programming, my issue with pair programming isn't pair programming. It's the issue of we're doing it for good reasons, but we then mandate it. What we see is we run an experiment. A small group of people do a bit of pair programming, see some good results. They say, excellent, the experiment worked. And I was talking to some guys last night about this. We don't learn the right way from experiments. We take the results and turn that into what everyone else should do. We don't sit there and go, oh, the experiment was quite good. Let's do that elsewhere and see if it works in other contexts. So I think we miss a trick. I don't think we realize that when we run experiments in software, we shouldn't be focused entirely on the results. We should focus on the fact that we ran an experiment successfully in the first place. And pair programming, I have an issue with this because I happen to be an introvert. Yes, that's not easy to understand right now. But I am. It's nothing to do with the fact that I can stand in front of a whole bunch of people. I have a technique for this, by the way. I'm talking to one person here. I just pretend you're one person. That's my technique. As an introvert, I find pair programming viscerally, physically painful. Okay? I can do it, and I enjoy aspects of it, but I'm not going to love it if I have to do it all day. And yet there are organizations that I know of that would say, well, it's got so much value, we've mandated pair programming because we like torturing 50% of humanity. Okay. That's good. I realised the level we set now. What gets you going is torture. Brilliant. Okay, next, keyboard clacking. The culture of keyboard clacking. Again, everyone who's worked in software probably has an understanding of this. We are not transcribing. We are not just typing. It's not about the typing. Who's a manager of a software team in some respect? Loosely guides them maybe. Okay, great. Wonderful. Please take one thing away from this talk that has nothing to do with the rest of the talk, this one, which is it's not about the tick, 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 tick. They're not working then. What they're doing then is doing stuff that makes you stop moaning at them. Okay? All of this stuff that you don't see is the important stuff. It's when they're in the shower, they might be, conceivably, thinking about some design. Yeah, right, I am sad enough to do that. But there are other times as well. Not always in the shower. The other experiences that you might have, going for a walk. I have a notorious past of working in open source. And the reason open source companies work for me is they let me work from home. And that means that I can work at a keyboard for 2 hours a day. The rest of the day I spend out on walks trying to actually think about what the heck I'm going to do when I get back to the keyboard. And the problem with modern environments, I think, in software is that we have this culture of if the keyboard's not clacking, you ain't working. And that's absolute fudge. It's not true. Okay, so that's one of the other things I'm fighting against. Finally, a related phenomenon, keyboard ballet. Now, again, I do apologize for people who don't work in software. This I might have to explain. But there are a group of individuals in this industry that enjoy this element of being able to sit in front of a computer and type in code so fast that you can't see what they've done. It's like a blur. It's beautiful. I have no idea what the person's done. I will sit there and all I hear is My next question is, what file was that? And what have you done with it? And what changes might you have made that I need to be aware of? This is another thing that's become a phenomenon in our industry, unfortunately, this emphasis on keyboard ballet, which I also think is inhumane. Because I think if there's one skill that someone on their deathbed opens up and goes, I'm so glad I learned that, it probably won't be keyboard ballet. If it is, I'm sorry for you. Okay, so a little more history, very briefly. I've been certified 3 times. well, arguably more if you consider psychological assessment, but certainly in terms of in sort of certification in the Agile term, I've certainly been certified. And I've been certified by 3 very different individuals, Jess Sutherland, Ken Schwaber, and Craig Larman. Collectively, if you got them together, I think there would be a brawl. However, what I've found is that they all teach it incredibly differently. And they all have a definition of what Agile is, because we all have to have one, I think. And one of the ones I focus on, because I particularly find it funny, having a rudimentary understanding of psychology and physiology, right? So hyper, the hyper-performing team. Hyper is not a good thing. Okay, it's usually overextending activity into dangerous areas where physiologically and mentally you might break down. I'm not sure I want my teams doing that. So another area that I have to try and readjust. So where have we been? We've done 14 years of agility with the label. And we've spent a lot of man-hours and a lot of effort and a lot of conferences trying to figure out what the heck we've done. And I put to you that I think we've actually had quite a good outcome. I think what we've done is we've really tuned the engine. We've got an amazing engine on our hands in some companies. There really is nothing this engine can't do. We can throw change at it. We can throw all sorts of ideas at your software development teams or your teams generally that have to work in agile environments, and they can deal with it, and they're going to run at full pace. The problem is we've got different problems now, okay? We're not, unfortunately, there yet. This is the quiet voice in the corner. It can feel a little bit, I've noticed this when coming to my first Agile conference, there's almost a little bit of, we're almost done yet. We're almost looking for the next problem. So this talk is a little bit about the next problem, okay? And it starts with the poverty, please let me get away with this one. The poverty of Agile. Now, does anyone know who that person is vaguely in the background? It's Proust. 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 P to his friends. Marcel. Yes. Here's a man who doesn't know how to stop writing. Has anyone ever tried to read one of his novels, all 7 volumes of it? You understand that I'm not using him as an example, really, of a poverty in language. One of the things that people don't know about Marcel is he used to have a real relationship with language and terms. He would have an obvious physical reaction when someone used a term to him. And unfortunately, he predates Agile by quite some way, but I believe he would have a very physical reaction to the word Agile. And it would be one of, oh, because it's a cliche. It's become a cliche. It's become a dangerous cliche. It's become something that you do, are you Agile or not? And I think it's time to redress that, because if we go back to why we're trying to do any of this, we start to realize that that's great. The journey we've gone along is fantastic, but the term itself is starting to sit very badly with us. The idea here is that it was an extremely good idea that we had in the beginning. Does anyone know what the beginning idea of agility was? The very first, this is what a philosopher does. Sometimes I work, but not very often. I think about these sorts of things. What was the beginning thing? Has anyone worked in, notionally, a waterfall team? What was the difference there? Wow, quiet crowd. It's the food, isn't it? Okay, so the original idea was, how do we embrace change? Okay, it was perfect. The very first book that I think anyone notionally agreed could possibly be Agile had the best subtitle. Does anyone know what that book was? What was the first book of Agile-ish stuff? Generally recognized. It was the XP book. Very early on, one of the XP books. And the idea there was the subtitle was perfect. The subtitle nailed it. Embracing change. Okay, everything else is ceremony and mechanics. But if we can embrace change, then that's actually what agility was supposed to mean. It didn't mean iterations, didn't mean Scrum, didn't mean Kanban. It meant, can we deal with change? Whatever is necessary to help us do that. Everything else we built on top. Now, we have other examples where good ideas turn bad in history. One of the problems we see is political parties. Now, this is a little bit UK-centric, so I'll try and explain it. In the UK, what happens is political parties, before an election, basically try and convince you that they're going to do something good for 4 years, usually. So they'll put a few documents out, and they'll try to convince you that they're not really lowlifes, but they're actually going to try and do something nice for you. And then what they do is they give it a name. It's called a manifesto. They put out manifestos and they say, we're going to do these things. And then what happens is, unfortunately, if they're successful, they get into office, and for the next 4 years, we beat them up because they didn't deliver on the manifesto. We spend the entire time telling them they're not doing what they said they were going to damn well do. And that's nuts, because they're going to be doing then what is necessary in light of new intelligence, new information. So the problem with manifestos is they represent a singular point in time and someone's set of beliefs at that point in time. And they don't change, they don't evolve, and they're things that you can use to beat people up to say, well, we haven't done that yet, or your version is wrong. Okay, so I have a fundamental problem with manifestos, which I'm going to explore a little bit in this talk. And the problem with it, I think we can recognize, is that we end up with what can only be construed to be the one true way. It's a divisive experience having a manifesto. It also helps to clarify sometimes. But we don't have a good history of manifestos actually joining groups together. We have an excellent history of them being diversive. And partly that is because of the doctrine. It's considered the one true word, and if you're not doing it my way, then it's not right. Okay? I don't know how many, has anyone had that discussion inside a company where someone turns around and says, this is the right way, you're not doing it right. No one's looking at, is it working? It's just arguing from their beliefs. And so there's a problem with that because it becomes dogma, and then it becomes this additional word that I really like, and I had to look up what this word meant, to be honest. Ossification. I do apologize for an audience that probably isn't first language English, and I didn't even know what this word meant for a while. But this is a pretty good word, because if you look its definition up, and I have to, it means to cease developing and become stagnant. These are not good things, by the way. Particularly the last one, can be smelly. The problem is that once you have codified something in a manifesto, there's almost this lazy quality that ekes in to go, well, the smart guys have sorted that lot out now, so we don't need to worry about it. We just need to turn that into something we do. And I think that's a shame, that's a paucity, it's a poverty in our industry, is that we look to these manifestos, we look to this doctrine, and we stop thinking for ourselves. Okay, so I came to this conference with open eyes. I'd never intended to be a villain here. I didn't intend to come here and tell you everything you do is wrong, and I won't, because everything you do is probably right. However, I am here to remind you that you in the Agile community, put your hands up if you are working in an Agile sense. You believe in agility. Come on. Come on, people. It's all right. I'm not going to pick on you. Yeah, good. So do I. Absolutely. What the heck is everyone else doing here? Yeah, wow. Are you here to be indoctrinated? Don't scare the customers. Yeah, sorry. There's a different session along the hall. They put glasses on you. They repeat many, many times to you that you will like Agile. You will like Agile. It'll be fine afterwards. Okay. The thing here is agility was the chosen one. It was the thing that was supposed to win the war. I always hark back now to episode 3 of Star Wars, which was, let's face it, the better one of those 3, where the screaming from Obi-Wan was, you were supposed to be the one that saved us, and look what you've become. But I don't suggest it's necessary agility's fault. I think we've lost our way a touch. And I think that at the moment it'd be nice if we reminded ourselves of what the heck we're doing, which some of you might be wondering now that you've been in the room for a while. Okay, there's 2 questions that matter in software development once we get broad. There's how do we build the right things or not build anything? That can be equally important. The amount of times I've worked with organizations where the right answer is don't do it. You don't want it, they don't want it, stop. Usually followed very quickly by, we're all going to be out of a job if we do that. And then they go and do it anyway. But yeah, we should be always questioning, how do we build the right thing? And there's a whole school of thought on this in the industry right now. If you haven't been looking at impact mapping, deliberate discovery, we're going to be talking about user stories later, story mapping. These are techniques that address this one. They're trying to put a steering wheel on our engine such that we might actually end up where we want to go. Okay, so I love the analogy I have for this is stop worrying about velocity. We don't know where we're pointing yet. No good having an engine going full blast and us heading off into the sunset when we're not going the right way. So this is all about steerage. And then we have building the right thing right, which is the craftsmen in our industry. They are screaming at us. We do testing, do CI, do these other things. Great, wonderful. They are screaming because they want us to build the software correctly, which is fine. But there is something else we need to worry about, and it's the one axiom that I'm going to ask you to accept. I mean, the definition of axioms is essentially something I'm going to say that you can't question. I like axioms. I've tried to implement a lot of axioms in my relationships. They've not worked. But this one I'm going to try and introduce for you, which is there's one axiom in software development which can be characterized by this lovely ancient phrase, which is this too shall pass. Change is inevitable. Everything will pass. Sometimes we want it to. Okay, so this is the only thing that we should be most worried about, I think, in software. And interestingly, when you view software delivery, particularly, or any agile system that produces a product, in light of agility facilitating this, the ability to change, then you start to question almost everything we do. Because we do a lot of activities that are not related to this. Okay. So it's a fundamentally different perspective, and it affects everything. My colleague David Dawson gave a talk earlier about architecture and design and testing. And the interesting thing there is we use the term architecture not as you might expect it to be. We use it as the collection of philosophical viewpoints you bring to everything you do. Okay, as soon as you approach a piece of software, building anything, you have biases, you have beliefs, you have values. The interesting about values is they're incredibly subjective to you. There is no such thing, as in my experience, there is no such thing as shared, entirely shared values. You have individual values that occasionally align vaguely with other people. But you, trust me, if anyone's honest and you say, what do you really value? They don't sit there and say, you know, working software over some other things. They don't say that. If they're honest, do it. Do it tonight, right? We've got a party tonight. Get the person next to you drunk, and if they drink, and ask them what they really value. It will unlikely be one of the agile values. It's more likely to be along the lines of money's quite nice. Yeah, safety, freedom, yeah, cars. Something like that, which is honest at least. So we have, what I'm trying to say here is we've got this baggage, we've got these biases, we've got our own individual philosophies. And that's what architecture means. Architecture is your philosophy. Which means we need to look carefully at it, because when we're trying to deliver systems, the way we architect them belies the assumptions we're making. And I wouldn't normally have a problem with this if those assumptions weren't in conflict with the basic rule of software or product delivery, which is change. So let's have a look at the schools of thought. I bet you didn't think you'd be doing that after lunch. Okay, first school of thought I'd like to introduce is Plato's. Plato's school of thought was interesting for many reasons. I won't go into some of the details of Greek society, but needless to say, it's not well aligned with our society today. However, he did have a real point. He was trying to state that there was perfection, there was the perfect form, and we aspire to it. We try our best. We work very hard. We plan, and if we excel, if we have eret, we have excellence as part of what we're aiming for, then we will get there. Very optimistic view on life. There's an interesting analogy here to an approach to software, particularly delivering software. This is essentially a full-on endorsement of waterfall. If you plan and aim for perfection and believe that perfection is the goal, then waterfall actually makes a bit of sense. It might be a false promise, but it's a promise nonetheless, and it's aligned. The problem I have is that many people think this way, that we are aiming for perfection and try to apply it to agility, try to apply it to adaptable software or product delivery systems. And that means we try and perfect the heck out of something that can't be perfected. And it's actually the wrong set of values. So to Plato, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say, no. No, we're not aiming for perfection. Instead, I would like us to consider Heraclitus instead. Anyone know what Heraclitus said? Lots of other things as well. But what did he say? It's a test. Come on. Which is, sorry? Sorry. Everything flows. You never step in the same stream twice. All right, there's always arguments to say, did he say this or not? It's a bit blurry. But essentially, that was his point. Is change is inevitable. Change is nature. Unfortunately, we can't go out of time and observe change without time. But we can essentially say that since time is part of our fabric of reality, at least as we perceive it, then yes, you never step in the same stream twice. The unknown happens. This is where I start to merge Heraclitus into Seneca. Seneca was a Stoic. He was also an aggressive Stoic, as they say. Somebody that would actually argue about it a lot. And his point, very simply, can be distilled down to, the next hour is not promised you. Sounds a bit depressing, doesn't it? Although, honestly, right now, the hour kind of is, because I'm at least here for an hour. So, yeah, next hour is at least threatened on you. So Stoicism basically says you don't know what's going to happen. Bad things happen. Good things happen. It changes. Stoicism is about trying to deal with that. It's a very optimistic view on it in saying, look, just accept you don't know. And I think this is a far nicer way of approaching software delivery and being agile, is trying to be stoic about it. And knowing that we don't know. Why don't we try something and we don't know where it's going to go? And it also goes straight in the face of most estimating tools. If the next hour is not promised you, how the hell are you going to do a program for 2 years? Stop trying. It's one mechanism. Because what you want in 2 years' time won't be what you want now anyway. Okay. So what sort of basis can we do? This is ancient philosophy. Let's bring it bang up to date with a wonderful phrase that I only encountered about a year ago, which is anti-fragility. Okay? This is essentially the practical application of Stoicism. Okay? Given that we don't know what's going to happen, what can we do? Well, we can attempt to build systems that don't just accept change, certainly don't resist it. They are systems that try to do much more with change than you may be familiar already. So I'm going to talk about anti-fragility as a real goal for you to aim for in your delivery teams, how they work, how you engage the client, how you engage people who own the budgets. Everything gets affected by this underlying principle. If you accept it to be the underlying principle of everything we do, because it's extremely conducive to change and agility. And it has less baggage, which I quite like. Okay, so aren't we there yet with this? Well, no, not really. Not really. Because arguably, sometimes when you look at a cursory glance at anti-fragility and the ideas of embracing change, you kind of think, well, can't we do that already, don't we? Come on, we're sort of there. Whenever I hear that sort of thing, I tell a story. And it's a story that's supposed to make you feel a certain way. Okay? I call the story the inconvenient truth of the killer change. So imagine, if you're not in software, don't worry. Imagine you've done something, look, you've been working on something for a period of time. I use the rough measurement of 10 iterations. It can happen at any point in time. As soon as you start a project, this can happen. But say you're 10 iterations in. And you're sitting there and you stand up, because that's what people do, by the way. This whole idea of standing up and a stand up, that's yesterday. I sit down. That's why we have chairs. So we're sitting down and I stand up and we're trying to avoid doing a status update. And the product owner comes in and he'll say that one phrase that has a real effect on you. He'll say, I want one small change. And at this point in time, you go through the 7 stages of grief. I'll talk about the highlights. The first stage that we need to worry about is anger. How dare you want me to change? Do you understand what we're doing here? You want me to do something different? You mean, you didn't know what you wanted? Didn't you plan? This is quickly followed by a realization, because we're supposed to be agile. And so we move very quickly from anger to guilt. Because we know, we know, that one small change was supposed to be small. It could have been. We know this, but it isn't. And it isn't not for our fault. We're not desperately upset with ourselves, although we are almost crying at this point. But we also know that it's a natural problem in our software. And so we have options now about what we could do. But first, we need to characterize that problem. And the wonderful phrase that I've heard for this problem is the elephant in the stand-up. It's all the software or stuff that you've done yesterday that is now in conflict with reality. And it hurts. And no one wants to acknowledge it. Because if you acknowledge it, you have to use the M word. And as soon as you say mistake, someone wants to have a go at you over it. So you're desperately trying to avoid it. And we have wonderful ways of hiding the elephant in stand-up. We have at least several tools at our disposal. One of them is to say, do you know what? I think we need to just can this version now and do another one. We need a greenfield project now because you know what? It's getting too hard to develop things. How can I say this without me looking bad? It's just getting difficult now. Business has changed. So we need a new project and we need to shelve that last thing we created. Okay, that was good, but now we need to move on. And so that's where the new project starts. And you recreate exactly the same elephant on that project. Anyway, that's one option. Second option, and this is one of my favorites, is we've got to pay back some technical debt. At this point, the business is sitting there going, oh yeah, sounds reasonable. Don't people accrue debt normally? All right, okay, I'm with you. How much technical debt do we have to pay back? A couple of months, give or take. We're great at estimating, didn't you know? A couple of months. Okay, what am I going to get in those 2 months? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. No, you have to understand, we're paying back your debt. Because you made us move too quickly. It's your fault, really. And now we need to pay it back. I'm sorry, didn't you know it's in the small print? It says it in the product owner contract, right? At some point, you're going to need to pay back your technical debt. Okay, so maybe that will work for you. The last one is really fascinating because it's completely a misunderstanding of the definition of the term. Okay, and please, I will know by your reaction if you've used this. Okay, we need to do some refactoring for a while. Yes, I've done it. Yeah, refactoring. Yeah. Haven't you heard? It's red, green, refactor. That means we've got to do it. A lot now. A couple of weeks of refactoring. Technically, it's impossible. Well, I guess you could do it. It's almost impossible to do 2 weeks of refactoring. Refactoring is supposed to be one small change to your code, possibly along the lines of a line, without changing the behavior of it. If it takes you 2 weeks to do that, you maybe want a different industry. Okay, so whenever you say refactoring, whenever I've said refactoring, I don't mean I'm refactoring. What I'm trying to say is, I made a mistake. It's not quite the way it should be. And I need to change it, because otherwise it's going to get worse. And the problem is, the next thing you do, the refactoring, the new project, the technical debt payback, if you don't approach things differently, you're going to recreate the elephant again. I've seen this many times now. I find it quite depressing. I've got a lot of projects where, they start greenfield every 2 years and they recreate the same blob of stuff that doesn't move forward. And that to me feels like a shame. And it doesn't seem to matter what techniques they use. They could be using refactoring, they could be using TDD, they could be using any agile way of working you pick. And they still manage to recreate an elephant. Okay? The question here is that I don't think we can completely insure against it, but we can manage its size. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here, because change is inevitable. And the approach I'd like you to take away is to think in terms of pebbles, not boulders. Okay? We spend an awful lot of time shoving forward software that doesn't want to move. We could become incredibly agile in our practices, processes, backlogs, people, self-organizing teams to the max. But if the software doesn't keep up, it becomes the thing that slows us down. And the technique I've seen to help with this is to not have the boulder in the first place. To try to reduce it down to a bunch of pebbles. Because you may have realized this yourself, but moving forward, even a large number of pebbles is a darn sight easier than shoving a boulder. I know, I have been to Utah, I've done the tests. And the interesting thing here is, why have we got the boulder in the first place? At least one of the reasons we've got it is because of this quality. We want robust software, don't we? Has anyone actively ever aimed for non-robust software? I want something flaky. I'm crazy. I just want to see what happens. We don't usually want that sort of surprise from our software, although we often get it. The problem with robustness is it comes at a big cost. Okay? It can often be the simple default as well. We want robust software. Great software. Because we think the alternative is fragile. We think that if we aren't going to do robust, if we aren't going to aim for the platonic form of perfect robustness, we're going to end up with fragile software. So we better darn well try and be robust about this. The problem with robust is that it's not the opposite of fragile. It actually has an interesting set of qualities to it, because robustness, when you look at it through our lens now of change, it has two possible outcomes. It'll either completely ignore the change because it's not part of its world, which is probably not what we want. We've got a great piece of software, but that change you want to make to it, our software ain't going to care. We can't move it on. Doesn't care about your change. Not the ideal. The worst case scenario is it'll actively resist it. So when we're trying to shove forward a piece of software that is robust, we find it very difficult to move it forward, not only in its design and architecture, but in its runtime as well. Okay, you see this when you see such things as robust processes. We have a robust and formal release process. No mistakes, ever. Now, the interesting thing with robust is it's a false promise, because the platonic perfect form does not exist. So the problem with robustness is it relies on there being perfection, which is a fallacy. And then what we find is there's always fragility somewhere. We see it usually on a Friday about 5:30 when we try and do a release. And that really robust process opens up to you and tells you its real problems. Okay. So my point to you is robust is not what we're aiming for in our software or architecture or design. But we have to be very careful naming things now. And this next joke, I do apologize, it is a little bit culturally sensitive. Okay, but do we have any Dutch people in the room? No. Where are all the Dutch gone? Oh, Jürgen's not here. No. He'll be out in the sun. He's for writing his books. Okay, I should get, Jürgen would understand this joke, but I'll translate it for you. Is that service-oriented architecture, something that we all use in terminology in the industry. Does anyone know what that might mean in Dutch? Yes. It's basically viruses and not nice ones. One's contracted in nasty ways. So whenever you hear a SOA consultant in Holland, you understand the power of naming. Okay, so we have to be a little bit careful here. But the term that's been coined by someone better than I, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, is this idea of anti-fragile, which, if we look at the continuum, okay, we start with fragile, things that go, can't deal with it in the face of change. Okay, most of my relationships, fragile. It's true. It's tragic but true. Right, robust. Okay, I'm going to deal with this no matter what. Okay, I don't care about, I am totally oblivious to the world. Okay, that's robust relationships. Probably not very powerful or romantic, but they're there. Okay, moving along the continuum, anti-fragile. Anti-fragile doesn't just mean embrace change. It means to thrive on it, to build systems of people and processes and practices and software that will not just embrace change, but thrive on the challenge of change. Because change is what we call a stressor. It's a stress on the system. And we should feel very guilty if we don't want to maximize the opportunity of that stressor. And so anti-fragility will help us do that. Seriously, 5 minutes? Is that all I got left? I've got tons of slides. That's all right. Apparently, there's a sneaky hint here. She has to keep coming back the longer I go on. It's not really a way of getting me off stage, I'll be honest. Okay, so we want to thrive on change, and we need some mechanisms to consider it. So I'm going to leave you with these tools in the remaining 5 minutes that I've got. Okay, the life preserver is the first tool I want you to leave you with. The life preserver is very simple. It's basically, as a consultant, I can only do certain things. I can draw circles, squares, and triangles. If anyone would like to be certified as a consultant, I will do that for you after the session, if you can demonstrate all three shapes. So we take a circle, and we say we've got core, and we've got integration. And then what we do is we begin to place our components on this diagram, and I often do this really big. And when I say components, I just mean pieces of software that have a single concern. And then what I'll do is, after a while, I'll begin to group these things and say, okay, these things change together. Group things together that change together. The whole point of this tool is to help you to visualize change in your code base. So consider it. Many people do not. And so once you begin to consider change, you begin to understand how to manage that change. And you can then build systems that embrace it and thrive on it. This is the distilled version, by the way, because I have 5 minutes left. Okay, so we have problems with other architectural tools. The pizza boxes, everyone's seen it. You know, you've got infrastructure, repositories, services, web services, UIs. Terrible diagram. Stop using it. If anyone's using that, do not use it. It's a terrible, terrible diagram. The reason, apart from that one looking great, the reason it's a terrible diagram is because it doesn't follow Russ's criteria of good diagrams. Yeah, I could have weighed these in my favor, couldn't I? Okay. What makes a good diagram? The questions it answers and the questions it asks. The majority of diagrams in software architecture do neither. They give you false answers, and they ask you absolutely no questions other than what the heck am I looking at? Okay, so the life preserver helps us understand where your component goes. What should your component do? Consider the evolution of those components and those systems and how they relate to one another. Group things together that change together. And then once we start to consider change, we can start to look at what I call fault lines. What are the areas that need to communicate with each other? And if they do in different areas, they evolve at different rates, then I have a fault line, very much like tectonic plates. I've got friction between plates now, and I need to manage that somehow. Okay? If you think about these things in software architecture, you are asking yourself more questions than most software architects ever ask themselves. Okay? It's a really cool thing to do. How do we implement it, though? What's the point of us coming up with a beautiful diagram and going, that's great. Now give it to the code monkeys. Let's see if they can build something. Let's not do that, please. Being a code monkey myself, it's not a nice situation to be in. When my first ever job in software, I was interviewed. They said we do 9 months of design in UML. And then, and I kid you not, the action he used was for the last month, we just churn out the code. And literally, it was literally, there was a monkey there dancing whilst he did it. And then the code's just finished. We're not doing that here. We're not coming up with diagrams that should be separate from what we build. And the truth is, if we want to do a big monolith application, if we approach it with a life preserver, we will still end up with a design and architecture that can embrace change. But if you really want to thrive on change, you've got to go a step further. You've got to get back to pebbles. And interestingly, we've seen this in industry already. Anyone heard of microservices? Yeah, one? If you haven't, take a little peek. Okay, it's actually a very simple concept, but it is essentially the pebbles at runtime. And if you want to know what effect it can have, take a look at the companies that have adopted it. This is not something that's come out of academia. This is not something that some philosopher has thought of on a mountain somewhere in Greece, or in my case, London. Okay, this is very real and it's very tangible. Okay, these are the pebbles. They are single-purpose services with uniform interfaces, and you design them using the life preserver as well. If anyone wants to see the life preserver in action, grab me in the bar. Not that I'll need life-saving, but if anyone actually wants to see it in action, I can demonstrate it to you. Now, the problem with this is that, again, it's got that service name in it, and we could end up doing SOA, not the SOA that you're thinking of now, by the way. How do we avoid catching diseases doing SOA? Well, one mechanism, to naively say, is let's write a manifesto. Let's do a microservices manifesto. I've actually considered just doing a manifesto on how to get to the bathroom. Because we need one, right? How do we do? We can't do this right if we don't all have a shared vision. Please not. Let's make it a manifest no. That's sad, isn't it? Sorry, but I have to try. And I actually wrote one as well. And I played it well, right? Okay, so bear in mind what SOA means in Dutch. Diseases. That's a disease. That's a cuddly toy you can get for your kid. And I'll let you look up what type of disease it is. It's not a nice one. Okay, so yeah, this is the manifest no that is saying, please, let's not create one for microservices. They're very simple, they're very straightforward, and they let us build anti-fragile systems. We don't need a manifesto, we just need to understand anti-fragility, and then we've got a common starting point, because we have a common benefit. Okay, so things to take away. Remember, change is in fact an opportunity. Okay, it really should be. Next time someone challenges you with, we're going to change, please don't react badly and say, well, screw you, we're going to cancel the sprint now. You changed your mind. I only asked for 2 weeks of commitment. What's wrong with you? Okay, try not to do that. We're supposed to be agile. We're supposed to be reactive and ideally embracing of change. So let's try and do that. The Life Preserver is a great tool for visualizing and working with your software to consider the speed of evolution of your code base. So if you're working in software, or if you want to apply it to systems, doesn't matter what the parts are, it helps you understand how to build systems that thrive on change. Okay, and microservices are just one design approach in software for turning this into what you actually run at runtime. Okay, and the big payback before the nice lady comes back and says, I've got 1 minute left. Why are we doing this? Well, we have that fluffy term, innovation. Okay, and lots of people disagree on what that means. I think it's very simple what that means. If we don't have innovation, we do not compete. Chances are in the current world, the world we have, we need to innovate to beat the competition. So the good news is, what you are doing in agility, if you put it in the context of anti-fragile systems and embracing change, absolutely essential to your companies, your organizations, even your life being a good one and succeeding. It's massive. Pat yourself on the back. Serious, it's a big thing. Because you can't beat the competition with agility alone. It has to be agility in the context of the change that challenges you. And therefore you need to build systems that embrace it, thrive on that change. So yeah, you can't beat the competition with Agile, but you can beat them with innovation. And you can innovate if you can change direction. Agility, that's what it was supposed to mean. Okay, so the challenge for you to take away as homework is go ahead and scare the bejesus out your competition. Okay, innovate faster than them. Now it sounds a little bit trivial, but I'm working with several organizations in London who've deliberately got me in because they have a competitor who's doing this. And that competitor is using microservices and building software and delivering software faster. At the moment, those companies are the small ones. But the bigger companies are being threatened now. So these techniques are going to be much more valuable as we go forward. Okay. And I'm sorry, it does require you to know a lot more than just processes. You're going to need to know every aspect of what might be blocking our ability to be anti-fragile. Okay? Thank you very much. I hope it's been useful.
If there is a quick question.
Of this strange world and this strange activity that we're involved in called software development. Who does software in the room? Because I realize on Agile conference, we get software people, and then we get people who don't do software, and we get people who never want to even touch the stuff. So go for the first category first. Anyone done software recently, as in written code of any form? Excellent. Okay, second category. Those that don't touch software, but know people who do. And third category, those that never want to touch software in the past. Wonderful. Okay, just for you, this talk is, no. Okay, so my shtick at the moment, my thing in the industry, I suppose, is trying to look at what I think are sort of the gross injustices of software, primarily. I think we do an awful lot of work and a lot of effort gets expended on trying to hurt people. Trying to, not consciously, I'm not saying we're evil, but I am saying that we do a great job of spreading doctrine and dogma that just seems to end up hurting individuals. And my thing is that I spend most of my time with people trying to do this crazy activity of software delivery. Does anyone know why software is absolutely crazy? Utterly nuts. But no one should embark on it, ever. Do you know what the main characteristic of it is? It's not frozen. Oh, boy, is it not frozen. Worse than that, though. Yeah, it's certainly not frozen. What else is wrong with it? We don't sit there and go, oh, the experiment was quite good. Let's do that elsewhere and see if it works in other contexts. So I think we miss a trick. I don't think we realize that when we run experiments in software, we shouldn't be focused entirely on the results. We should focus on the fact that we ran an experiment successfully in the first place. And pair programming, I have an issue with this because I happen to be an introvert. Yes, that's not easy to understand right now. But I am. It's nothing to do with the fact that I can stand in front of a whole bunch of people. I have a technique for this, by the way. I'm talking to one person here. I just pretend you're one person. That's my technique. As an introvert, I find pair programming viscerally, physically painful. Okay? I can do it, and I enjoy aspects of it, but I'm not going to love it if I have to do it all day. And yet there are organizations that I know of that would say, well, it's got so much value, we've mandated pair programming because we like torturing 50% of humanity. Okay, that's good. I've realized the level we set now. What gets you going is torture. Brilliant. Okay, next, keyboard clacking, the culture of keyboard clacking. Have you again, everyone who's worked in software probably has an understanding of this. We are not transcribing. We are not just typing. It's not about the typing. Who's a manager of a software team in some respect? You know, loosely guides them maybe. Okay, great. Wonderful. Please take one thing away from this talk that has nothing to do with the rest of the talk, this one, which is it's not about the tick, 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 tick. They're not working then. Intangible, absolutely. Talking about dinner parties never gets the result you want unless the dinner party is with people who also do it. Yeah. Absolutely, all of those above. The other thing about software is that it's research and development, which means we're engaged in probably one of the most significant intellectually challenging pursuits of this century. And we try and treat it like putting together buildings and doing other things that we can tangibly hit. We do some insane work trying to turn what we do into something that other people relate to. And I think we should, at least if you take one thing away from this talk, maybe an admittance that what we do, if you are in software, what you do, no one else is ever going to get. They're just going to get in their car and the darn thing works or not. okay? Or they're going to get the plane flies. That's probably not the right joke at the moment, but plane flies or not. You know, what we do has tangible outcomes, but the way we approach it does not. What does have a tangible outcome, though, is when we cost money. Okay. Anyone that's run a company, and I've run a couple now, and never tried to budget anything, knows that everything we do costs money even if we can't hit it or see it. Because you sitting on that seat is something that I definitely want to understand why you're there and why all this is going to cost money, which is where the idea of estimating comes in. Although if you take I guess one of the things I've put to you already is that we're involved in research. Okay, good afternoon. How you all doing? How's lunch? Good lunch? Nothing better than being, after a really heavy, big, gorgeous lunch, coming into a darkened room on a sunny day and then being told you've got to pay attention for 45 minutes. I'm lucky, I can stand up, right? So being elevated helps. If I start to nod off, then I'm really going wrong. Okay, so this talk is a little bit out of my comfort zone. It's a little bit further than I usually speak. I'm very comfortable speaking about Java and technology and things, and I have a confession to make. I think this is my first ever Agile conference that's had the badge. Yeah. So you are not my crowd usually. But that doesn't mean you'd have to dislike me. You can get to know me. I will be fine. Okay, so who am I? Who's seen me speak before? Anyone ever seen me speak before? You have? Oh, excellent. And you came back. No, you have to. You work here. Okay. Okay, so those who unfortunately have had the experience of seeing me before, I apologize for that. For those that haven't, I'm going to completely reinvent myself again so we can get to know each other completely. Okay, so I'm a philosopher first and foremost. I think most people probably are. And what we do is spend our entire time trying to make research and development. Have you ever tried to go to a researcher and said, when are you going to be done? When are you going to be finished? They don't usually know. In fact, they usually look at you like you're incredibly naive. You're asking me when we'll find a cure for cancer. Well, it's not going to be next Wednesday. However, if we keep at it, maybe sometime in the future. Software, unfortunately, has some of the same qualities as research and development activities, which is why I'm very excited about how the industry is moving towards the idea of not explicitly estimating the way that we have in the past. However, my mission is to try to address some of what I call the inhumanity of software development, the activities we perform, we could dance, the activities we perform to try to make things easier for ourselves that conversely seem to end up making our lives hell. One of those things is pair programming. Who does pair programming in the room? There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to go out and take you outside or anything. No. Pair programming, my issue with pair programming isn't pair programming. It's the issue of we're doing it for good reasons, but we then mandate it. What we see is we run an experiment. A small group of people do a bit of pair programming, see some good results. They say, excellent, the experiment worked. And I was talking to some guys last night about this. We don't learn the right way from experiments. We take the results and turn that into what everyone else should do.